Hello, this presentation is going to tell you about all the different properties of water that make it a very unique substance and why water is absolutely critical for all life on Earth. The best place to start is with a list. So I'm going to give you guys a list of the properties of water that you need to be familiar with. Okay, the first property of water is something to do with chemistry, and water is what we call a polar molecule. Number two, water is both cohesive and adhesive. You may know something about those words already, but I'm going to explain to you what they mean in connection with water. Three, water can dissolve almost everything a little bit. Four, water has something called pH. pH is a number that you can measure, and pH is absolutely critical to life. Five, water absorbs a lot of heat before it evaporates. Six, water releases a lot of heat before it freezes. And seven, frozen water, or what we know as ice, always floats on liquid water. Okay, let's take each of these one by one and use some pictures and some interactions here to illustrate what each of these properties means. Okay, first of all, water is a polar molecule. Now, I'm sure most of you already know that the chemical formula for water is H2O. Okay, you've heard that before. The reason why water is called H2O is because the molecule is actually built out of two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom in the middle. So there are three atoms in this molecule. And these atoms are connected to each other in a way that makes the water molecule have something called polarity, or we say that it's polar. And what this means is that the water molecule has a negative area associated with the oxygen atom and positive areas associated with the hydrogen atoms. So this makes the water molecule very sticky. It will stick to other water molecules, and it will also stick to lots of other substances that water can come in contact with. Okay, now if you look at this picture, we see what we call hydrogen bonds. Now, hydrogen bonds are the attractions between different water molecules, and they form and they break very easily. So in this picture, you can count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 water molecules, and each of these water molecules is attracted to the nearby water molecules shown by these dotted lines. So we have a hydrogen bond here, and we have a hydrogen bond here, and a hydrogen bond here, and a hydrogen bond here. And these hydrogen bonds make the water molecules want to cling together. And that happens because the water molecule itself has a positive end and two negative parts. Excuse me, two positive parts and a negative part, like we saw in the previous slide. Now, water is also cohesive and adhesive, and this relates to the polarity that we just talked about. Because each water molecule is attracted to nearby water molecules, that makes water form a skin along the top, which is denser, slightly denser, and stronger than the areas below it. And this makes what we call surface tension. And surface tension is so strong that some insects and lightweight things can actually float or walk across water. If you look in this diagram, you can see that down here, all the water molecules are attracted to all the other water molecules around it in 3 dimensions. But up here at the top, those water molecules near the surface are only attracted to the side and downward, which makes those attractions a little bit stronger. So this forms kind of like a skin on the surface of the water, and we call this surface tension. Now, surface tension is produced by the cohesion or the attraction of water molecule to water molecule. And remember, this attraction is called a hydrogen bond. So cohesion is the name of the property. The water molecules are sticky to each other, and they're sticky because they can form hydrogen bonds with each other. Now, water also will stick to other substances, for example, glass. So if you look at this picture, the water molecules are being attracted to the glass, and this is allowing the water to actually creep up inside of this glass straw. And the narrower you make the straw, so if you look at this one here all the way to the left, this is a pretty wide one. But if you look all the way over here to the right, that's a very narrow straw. And you notice how far the water will actually be pulled up inside of this glass tube. This is because the water molecules are sticking to the glass because of adhesion. Adhesion is the stickiness between water and other stuff like glass. Now, because the water molecules are sticking to the glass and at the same time trying to hold on to each other, this allows water to creep up inside thin tubes that water can stick to. Now, this is incredibly important to plants because what happens is plants can use this cohesion and adhesion to produce a property called capillary action. And capillary action is the combined force of cohesion and adhesion that plants use to pull water upward from their roots to their leaves. And they can do this without using any energy because this is just physics. This does not require any energy from the plant to do this. So plants are able to pull water from the soil into their roots, up through their stems, and into their leaves where the water will evaporate by a process called capillary action. And capillary action happens because water is cohesive and adhesive. Okay, anything that can get wet is forming hydrogen bonds with water. So for example, if you put water on a piece of paper and the paper absorbs the water, you know that that paper is forming hydrogen bonds with the water. That makes the paper adhesive to water. And when something can get wet or is wettable, we say that it is hydrophilic. Hydro means water and philic means attracted to. So the word hydrophilic means attracted to water. And paper is a very hydrophilic substance. And guess what? Paper is made from plants, obviously, because plants depend for their whole lives in moving water by capillary action through their hydrophilic stems. Now, on other parts of plants, you may see places where water doesn't stick. And in this picture, you can see a dropper right here being used to put drops of water on a leaf. And you'll notice that the water is not sticking to the leaf. It's piling up into these little dome-shaped, shiny droplets. And that's because this leaf is covered with microscopic hairs that are hydrophobic. They will not form hydrogen bonds. So the water just beads up and rolls right off of this leaf. You may also see this in substances that are waxy or oily or greasy. Many birds, like ducks, have feathers that are coated with oil, which prevents them from getting wet, so they can stay warm and dry while swimming in very cold water most of their lives. Now, we just covered quite a few vocabulary words that are associated with the second property of water, when we say water is both cohesive and adhesive. So I've made a list of them here in one place. Now make sure that you can write a sentence or two about each of these words, because that would tell you or tell me or your teacher that you understand what these words mean. They're all related to the properties of cohesiveness and adhesiveness in water. Third property of water is the fact that it's a universal solvent. Now, I don't like that phrase because people say it and they really don't know what it means. But what this means is water can dissolve just about everything a little bit. Water actually dissolves many things very well, but everything will dissolve in water a little bit because water is what we call an excellent solvent. So in this picture, the water in the glass would be the solvent, and the sugar or the salt that's being added would be the solute. And the more solute you put into the water, the more concentrated the solute becomes. So water and solutes together form what we call solutions. And you can measure concentrations in solutions. Now the ocean obviously, is mostly water, and it has dissolved in it lots and lots and lots of chemicals. And a lot of these chemicals are salts. For example, sodium chloride, that's the most common one. But I don't know if you guys realize this, but ocean water contains trace amounts of just about everything on Earth. About all the elements in the periodic table have trace amounts, little bits of them dissolved in the ocean water. You can even find tiny amounts of gold and silver and platinum and all the valuable elements on the periodic table dissolved in ocean water. Okay, water is also what makes up most of your body. Your body is about 70 to 90% water. And this water is used in lots of different ways. But one of the ways it's used is the water in your blood captures dissolved oxygen in your lungs. And this dissolved oxygen passes into your red blood cells and is then carried throughout your body. So this is a great example of how oxygen would be the solute dissolving in the solvent, which is water in our blood. And this is absolutely critical for all the cells in your body to get the oxygen they need to stay alive. Okay, number 4. Water has a property called pH, and pH is absolutely critical to life because all life on Earth, with a few exceptions, is found in what we call the zone of life. Now, the zone of life is really close to the middle of the pH scale. So let's look at this picture close up and see if we can figure it out. The pH scale basically divides up into 3 parts. Right here in the middle, in this diagram, it's colored green, is neutral, and that's the pH of pure water. Now, neutral pH is 7, okay, exactly 7. Anything lower than that, pH lower than 7, is going to be in what we call the acidic range. And acids are almost always indicated by the color red. Okay, so any pH lower than 7 is going to be acidic. And so acidic pHs go all the way down to 0. Now, anything with a pH higher than 7 is going to be what we call basic or alkaline. Okay, now there's 2 ways of thinking about that. Alkaline or basic, they mean the same thing. So any pH higher than 7 is alkaline, and these numbers can go all the way up to 14. But the zone of life, the area where most things live the best, is going to be between a pH of 6 and a pH of 8. So this zone of life is the pH where you find which you find inside of living cells. So anything associated with life, for example, milk or blood or water, are going to have a pH somewhere between 6 and 8. If the pH is lower than 6, we get down into a range down here, that's going to be too acidic for life. And if the pH gets higher than 8, that's going to be too alkaline or too basic for life. So the zone of life is the happy area. It's a place where cells do the best. Okay. All right, now there is a chemical called litmus that people can put on paper, and it's a very old test for pH. And there are 2 types of litmus paper. There's red litmus paper and blue litmus paper. And scientists figured out very early on that a substance is acidic if you test it with red litmus paper and the red paper stays red, but blue litmus paper turns red. So that's where these colors are originating. Now, if you go over to the alkaline side, if you put an alkaline substance on red litmus paper, it'll turn it blue. And if you put an alkaline substance on blue litmus paper, it'll stay blue. So this is one of the ways that you can test for pH. It just tells you, is it acidic, is it basic, or the third possibility, it could be neutral. And a neutral solution, like pure water, is going to have a pH litmus test of red staying red and blue staying blue. So I hope you found this chart interesting. It's got some things listed that give you examples of what different pHs are like. One of the interesting things about high pH substances that are alkaline, if you guys look up over here, okay, these things are almost always cleaning products. Cleaning products almost always have a high pH. And if you look at things down here that are acidic, okay, things that are acidic can include lots of foods that we like sodas and citrus things. As you go lower and lower, you get into the really dangerous low pHs like the pH in battery acid or in stomach acids. Okay. Oops, excuse me, I'll go back. Another interesting thing about pH is your tongue is a pretty good pH detector. If you taste things that are sour, that means that they have a low pH, and things that taste bitter almost always have a high pH compared to neutral. So sour taste and bitter taste is one of the ways your body can detect pH in our foods. Things that taste bitter are almost always bad for you, and then things that taste sour may not be ripe yet. So you can see how evolution has installed these detectors on our tongues to help us find the best quality foods. Now, we've got 3 more properties of water, and we're down here at number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Water is an interesting substance in that it has to absorb a lot of heat before it will turn into a gas or vapor and evaporate. And this means that water is a very good way to cool things down. So nature has given us what we call the ability to sweat, and sweat on your skin will absorb lots of body heat. And then as the water in the sweat evaporates, it carries this heat away from you, which will cool your body down. So humans stay cool in hot areas or hot conditions or hot climates by sweating. Now, lots of things also have to cool down, but they can't sweat. So dogs also use evaporating water to cool their bodies down, but they do this by panting. So they move air over their tongues and their throats and their mouths and their gums and their lungs very quickly, and this evaporates the water from their body, and in the process, the evaporating water carries the heat out of their bodies. So it leaves their body through their hot breath. Okay? Now, this process is called evaporative cooling. So evaporative cooling happens when you use evaporating water to cool something down. So humans do it by sweating, dogs do it by panting. Okay, next to the last property of water is the property of water that has to do with heat. Water releases lots of heat before it turns to ice or before it freezes. So this means a large body of water can absorb a massive amount of heat during the summer and then release it slowly during the fall. So that means if you have a house near the ocean in fall and early winter, you're going to have a much milder climate than somebody living at the same latitude farther inland. So land areas that are near large bodies of water experience a much more moderate climate. And I just noticed I forgot that word. So this should read, land areas near large bodies of water experience more moderate, M-O-D-E-R-A-T-E. Okay, I forgot that word. So land areas near large bodies of water experience more moderate climate. Okay, sorry about that, just noticed it. And finally, our last property of water, which is physically kind of weird. Most things, when they turn from from a liquid to a solid, become denser. But water is just the opposite. When water turns to a solid, which we call ice, it becomes less dense. So the ice crystals actually float. So this means that when a pond or a lake or a river freezes over, it freezes at the top first. So that means, for example, if you look at this picture of a pond, the ice is going to form at the surface first. So the top of the water is going to freeze over, and the area underneath is going to remain protected from the cold air. So the reason why it's freezing is because the air is cold. The cold is freezing or pulling heat out of the water, but the water is freezing at the top first. So that means the organisms living deeper under the water are not being frozen, so they can make it through the winter and they can survive. So the fact that ice floats is really important to aquatic ecosystems, because in the winter, the surface freezes over, the ice protects the water underneath from exposure to the cold air above, and lots of animals and plants can make it through the winter living in the liquid water beneath. Okay, so let's summarize this up. There are let's see, I forgot the number. There are 6 or 7 properties of water that you guys need to know. Water is a polar molecule. Water is both cohesive and adhesive. Water can dissolve almost everything a little bit. Water has something called pH, and pH is really important to living things. Water absorbs lots of heat before it evaporates, and water releases lots of heat before it freezes. And finally, water floats. So how many is that? That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 properties of water. And these are all reasons why water is absolutely critical to life on Earth. Thank you very much for listening. That's the end of the presentation.